are parallel shifts, especially when you are typically assuming a parallel shift across all maturities, or probably you are thinking of one single hedge instrument for the whole portfolio, which again is applicable when the whole portfolio is going to shift parallelly to the change in the interest rates. So for those kind of simple hedging scenarios, we are talking about the one factor risk matrix models, wherein we look at one interest rate, an increase or a decrease in the interest rate, how much impact it will have on the value of the bond. And based on whatever is the change in the value of the bond, because of the interest rate as a one single number changing, we will create our hedged instrument accordingly. As we will enter either into the derivatives market or whatever, using that as the impact because of a change in the interest rates. So on those lines, the focus is see, typically everyone is bothered about the interest rates risk. There are a lot of participants. Whenever we talk about assessing the interest rate risk, the focus is on two things: whatever the instrument that we are using for hedging and whatever the instrument that is getting hedged. Probably I have a portfolio of bonds. 30% of my money is invested in 2-year maturity bond. 50% I have in 5-year maturity bonds, and remaining 20% I have in 10-year maturity bond. Let's say this is my overall portfolio. Right? Now, probably this portfolio I am trying to hedge with some other interest rate future contracts. I am trying to hedge this portfolio with the interest rate future contract. Now, this interest rate future contracts, now should I get in with each of the contracts separately for different maturities, or should I look at one single scenario itself? Or probably I may try to hedge this entire thing with some other index based future contracts. I may use a different hedge instrument for hedging one portfolio, because it's not mandatory that for all of the for the entire portfolio I may not get separately the futures available in the futures market. Let's say I have a 2.5-year maturity bond, 5.5-year maturity loan. It's not mandatory that I will get them in the futures market to create a perfect hedge. So there is a possibility of a basis risk that exists in the process, because what I am hedging with and what actually needs to be hedged, they are two different instruments. But what is required to study is how they are going to move with respect to the interest rate changes. Right? Based on the past data I can do that, or based on the valuation approaches we can do how each of these instruments, the prices are going to move with a small change in the interest rates. And probably from a hedging standpoint, that knowledge is necessary. From an investor standpoint, they'll take their decision in terms of what is the optimal combination to create a portfolio. Right? How much, depending on the risk taking ability of the person, they may suggest 70% in short term, 20% in medium term, 10% in long term, or vice versa. So investors and investment analysts can typically create optimal portfolio combinations. And even from an asset liability manager's standpoint, the matching of the various buckets, the sensitivity across the asset and liabilities across the various buckets is something that they would be doing. So for each one of them, understanding how the interest rates are going to impact, and if the interest rates change, what is the impact on their asset liability combination portfolio, is something which needs to be assessed. For that, what we can typically see is we can think of interest rates whether they are parallel shift or non-parallel shift. If it is a parallel shift, this one factor models will be more applicable. But wherever we are seeing non-parallel shifts, we'll talk about the multi-factor models, which we'll cover in the next chapter. Right? So for as far as one factor models are concerned, The most common ones are being duration and even DV01, which is nothing but dollar value per 1 basis point change. 1 basis point change in the interest rate, or generally decrease in the interest rate. If the interest rate decreases by 1 basis point, what would be the increase in the price of the bond? Price value of $1. Sometimes, the different terms that are typically used, PVBP, price value of a basis point. Yeah, PV01 is also the same term. That's where PV and DV are used. DV is a US term basically, the dollar value. So PV is a very common word. Basis point, sometimes they use basis point or 0.1, which is basis point is also 1 basis point. 0.1 is also nothing but 1 basis point. So what we are saying is, if the interest rate change by 1 basis point, what is the impact on the price? So for example, if I see this using a semi-annual discounting, compute the DV01 for a 20-year 5% US Treasury bond that is yielding 4.5%. So as a part of my calculator, I can typically take the I by Y as 2.25%, because we are talking about a semi-annual discounting scenario. Semi-annual discounting. So that's where the interest rate, the yield, which is 4.5, I'm taking it as 2.25. I can take PMT as 2.5 because 5% is the coupon, that too on an annual basis. So on a semi-annual basis, I can take it as 2.5. N, which is the number of periods, I can take it as 40 because this is a 20-year bond and we are talking of semi-annual. So N can be taken as 40, and from here I am trying to compute the present value of the bond. This is what should give me the price of the bond initially. Okay, let me try to compute the price of the bond based on this. So it is coming out to PV 2.5%, number of periods being 40, and PMT being 2.25. Oh, okay, the rate is 2.25%. So based on probably the future value is 100, which is the maturity value or probably the face value. So this is saying that the bond should be sold at 106.55. Now what we are saying in the DV01 concept is, let's say if the interest rates are probably, let me do it here, if it is 2.25%, so if let's say the interest rates become 2.245%, that is what? A decrease by 1 basis point, right? 1 basis point means from 4.5%, basis point is nothing but 0.01%. 1 basis point is 1.01% change. So from 4.5, if the interest rate becomes 4.49%, 4.49% is on a semi-annual basis, it is becoming 2.245%. 2.245%. What is the impact on the interest? What is the impact on the price of the bond? The price of the bond is actually becoming 106.69. From 106.55, it is becoming 106.69. So what we are saying is, if the interest rate is falling by 1 basis point, the price of the bond is increased by $0.14, right? This is what we